Hi, good morning. Welcome, everyone. We'll get started in just a moment here. Thank you for joining us this morning, this afternoon, wherever you are. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Hi, my name is Dr. Saharaman Chaputin, Executive Director at the Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research, or FAR, as we like to be called. Welcome to today's webinar on mitigating methane through the Greener Cattle Initiative. Before we begin, please keep in mind that this webinar is being recorded and all participants are currently muted. We will open the lines for the Q&A. I am excited to discuss the Greener Cattle Initiative today. This initiative is a public-private partnership advancing research to ultimately reduce enteric methane emissions in the beef and dairy cattle industries. This 5-year initiative, launched by FAR and the Innovation Center for U.S. Dairy, is awarding $5 million in research grants to identify, develop, and validate scientifically sound, commercially feasible, and socially responsible mitigation options. COP is an important opportunity to examine emissions reductions efforts from multiple sources. Enteric methane is the single largest source of direct greenhouse gas emissions in the beef and dairy sectors, representing 2.5% of total US greenhouse gas emissions. Within the beef and dairy sectors, methane is primarily emitted through manure degradation and enteric fermentation, cows' digestive processes that allow them to consume grass and fiber. While there are several efforts to advance the sustainability of livestock production, most do not address enteric methane emissions. The Greener Cattle Initiative is convening partners representing multiple aspects of beef and dairy sector to share knowledge, to pool resources, and to accelerate research and technologies that reduce enteric methane emissions. The Greener Cattle Initiative was launched last year at COP26 in Glasgow, Scotland, and is also one of Aim for Climate's original innovation sprints. 1 year later, we are excited to discuss our progress. I'm joined today by a few of the initiative's participants to highlight the critical research opportunities and underscore the importance of reducing enteric methane emission. Dr. Juan Tricarico is Vice President for Sustainability Research at Dairy Management, Inc. His work focuses on sustainable milk production to support the Innovation Center for U.S. Dairy to drive trust and sales in milk and dairy foods. FAR established the Greener Cattle Initiative with the Innovation Center for U.S. Dairy, and we are fortunate to have Juan's expertise on this project. Jessica Langley is the Sustainability Director for JBS USA, where she coordinates the company's beef, pork, poultry, prepared, and retail-ready product sustainability program. Her work also includes the JBS Net Zero 2040 commitment. JBS joined the initiative steering committee earlier this year. Dr. Lucas Huntemer is Senior Advisor for External Innovation at Elanco Animal Health. His work focuses on interfacing and evaluating external opportunities for application within the Elanco product pipeline. I'm delighted you could join us for this important discussion on the dairy and beef industry's efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. I will now turn it over to Juan.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for those kind words of introduction. I am delighted to be here along with 2 members of the founding participants on the steering committee for the Greener Cattle Initiative. I would like to say a few remarks here. First of all, I'd like to recognize the fact that when FAR reached out to the Innovation Center for U.S. Dairy to discuss an opportunity to work together on enteric methane mitigation, we very quickly realized that this was a great opportunity. The challenge was how to develop a program that would allow others to come in and join in such a way that we could collaboratively work in order to advance this particular area. And most importantly, in order to address all of the research questions that are necessary to provide the industries, the dairy and beef sectors, with options to mitigate enteric methane emissions. As Dr. Chaponin said, you know, the Greener Cal initiative is really the only initiative that's focused exclusively on enteric methane mitigation in this way. There are plenty of other types of initiatives out there, most of which are looking at greenhouse gases in a broader sense, or methane, you know, in a broader sense. But we are focused exclusively on enteric methane. So, you know, this is not an area that is new. Research on enteric methane has been going along for quite some time. However, in the last few years, there's been an explosion on research, primarily driven by the fact that there's higher interest in environmental outcomes that are beneficial. And so that has been extremely, extremely important. FFAR, well, FAR and the Innovation Center for U.S. Dairy started working together with this understanding that pre-competitive research is critically important, and that public-private partnerships are critically important in this. Why? Because enteric methane mitigation is a wicked problem. It's a problem that needs to be addressed from a variety of different directions, and by the different stakeholders. You know, not one organization is going to take care of this. So it is a great opportunity for the entire dairy sector and the entire beef sector to collaborate. Not only do we want to go ahead and do that, you know, we also use that as an opportunity to take in information from these sectors, so that we can be informed by all the sector needs, and we can look at research that is fundamental, but at the same time research that will have practical implementation at scale. That is something that is important for the Greener Cattle Initiative as well, eventually, right? And the goal here is to leverage investments, but also resources in the form of shared knowledge that all of these participants can bring into the initiative, so that these shared knowledge can then be used to develop new technologies and practices, giving the sector stakeholders more options. And this is something that then happens at the individual company level, based on that platform of shared knowledge that the public-private pre-competitive research allows. So that was the challenge, you know, and I do have to say that I feel very excited and extremely satisfied with the work that we've been able to conduct so far. You know, it's only about a year ago that we announced the initiative. We managed to pull together a great group of companies and organizations willing to participate at this pre-competitive level, willing to not only provide financial resources, but also provide, you know, these non-tangible resources, their networks of experts, you know, their own expertise, all of which inform the way in which the Greener Cattle Initiative operates and moves forward. I also want to clarify for everybody that, you know, like I said, we made the announcement, we brought in the funds, we developed a request for applications, we put that request for applications out, and you know, that request for applications resulted in an amazing response from applicants, sending a large number of letters of intent. I think it was, if not the largest number that FAR had obtained in similar type of situations, one of the largest. And then as a result of that, we did invite a number of those for full proposals. We had completed technical reviews. We had our steering committee meet and started ranking those proposals. And so I want to convey in this particular panel that, you know, we have a system in place with the Greener Cattle Initiative. We've identified the areas that are important to conduct research on. We've been able to get technical reviewers excited and participating, in those processes, and we're moving along according to our targeted timeline. So I am extremely hopeful that we are going to be able to share lots of good news in the coming year, in this next year, and we're very close to the end of the year. So this is something that gets me particularly excited, because we believe that this is playing out the way that it should play. And like I said earlier, by using this pre-competitive approach to create a platform of shared knowledge, we are in fact enabling stakeholders across these sectors to then develop options that can be marketable, which is what we would like to see. We'd like to see particularly farmers in both the beef and dairy sectors to have multiple options so that they can choose which one or which ones are going to be most useful for their individual farming operations. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and give it back to you, Dr. Shapotin.
Juan, thank you so much. We'll now hear from Jessica.
Thank you, Dr. Shapotin, and hello, everyone. Really nice to be on this webinar, and a big thank you to FAR and the Greener Cattle Initiative for this opportunity. My name is Jessica Langley, and I work on sustainability for JBS USA. So I'll keep it brief, but I'll talk a little bit about why JBS USA joined Greener Cattle Initiative and kind of where we hope to go from here. And to do that, I think it's best to start with who the company is on our side. So we're one of the largest global food companies, and we have beef is a huge part of our portfolio. So we process quite a lot of beef and then sell that out to customers. And it goes into retail, food service, restaurants, grocery stores, etc. We also, just about a year and a half ago, made a net zero by 2040 commitment. This was a huge commitment from our company. It's something that is supported up and down the leadership group, and it's something that we're very fortunate to be part of, but it's something that is going to take and has taken already a lot of work and innovation and change from the company. So part of our net zero commitment, a huge part actually is our supply chain. And so when we think about our company globally and by any country, when we think about our company's greenhouse gas footprint, a vast majority of that is in our supply chain, and a vast majority of that is on the live animal and feed side. And that's certainly not a bad thing, right? We recognize that we all need food to survive, and we recognize it takes energy and resources to produce that food. So when we as a company think about net zero and we think about making progress towards net zero, one, we know we can't do it alone. And two, we know we need to figure out how to best support producers in efforts to reduce environmental impact from animal protein production, and not only reduce, but turn animal production into something that is quantifiably beneficial for the environment and beneficial for society, more so than we can quantify today, right? We know that there's a lot of benefits. But sometimes when we get into the numbers, it can get quite confusing in the details. So as we sat down and we looked at our greenhouse gas footprint, recognizing beef is such a huge part of our portfolio, and recognizing, as has already been pointed out, that enteric methane emissions are a significant contributor to emissions from beef, we started looking into what can we as a company, what can JBS do to support the reduction and mitigation of enteric methane emissions on farm. Now we process protein. We have manufacturing facilities, but we're not necessarily a company that has an overly strong research arm per se, right? Our R&D pipeline is going to look very different than maybe my colleague up here, Elenco's R&D pipeline, and that's just because we're different companies. So as we were looking at options available, we learned pretty quickly, well, the researchers and the scientists in the academic university, they know a lot about this topic, but there still seemed to be quite a few questions around how do we reduce enteric methane on farm, on ranch with cattle, both beef and dairy. So we started to search for what are efforts we can join to best support solving for those solutions, to best support bringing those answers to the marketplace, so that ultimately as Juan pointed out, there's a variety of tools and technologies and interventions that producers have to choose from that best fits their operation. So we're moving towards reduced methane emissions on farm. And FAR's Greener Cattle Initiative surfaced pretty quickly for us as a top contender with its multi-collaborative approach, the breadth and depth of research that had already been pulled into the group, and the ability to really take this in a step-by-step process and a thoughtful process and attempt to identify some of the best paths forward for investment in this space. And there's not one silver bullet, right? So we have to look at multiple project options across multiple perspectives and multiple levels of experience and expertise to find the best solutions that we can bring forward. So as a company and myself too, we're very humbled, and I'm really appreciative to join this effort. We have learned a lot. We've been able to, again, as Juan mentioned, kind of bring our own perspective to this. So we purchase, just in the US, we purchase over 6 million head of cattle from over 4,000 producers every year. And primarily those are feedlots. So that's not even including the cow-calf and dairy farms that the cattle originate from. So we bring that perspective, and what we hope to be able to contribute and then continue to move forward is bring the learnings from GCI and the technology that is developed into a more commercialized spot that, you know, does make economic sense for the producer and is implementable, and that we can generate high levels of adoption on and use our supply chain and our connections and our relationships to help bring those technologies to the producer. So we're, again, really excited to be part of this effort. We've, you know, as Juan said, sometimes it feels like progress can be slow across many topics to do with I'll just say generally animal ag and greenhouse gas emissions, but I can certainly assure you that the team, the GCI founding members and steering committee team has been hard at work. I've learned a lot in the process. There's been a lot of very thoughtful conversations. I think the whole group has learned a lot in the process, and this really sets us up for where does GCI go next, and also where do these public-private partnerships go next. And I think we'll get into it later on, but GCI has been such a great example of how to successfully go about some of these public-private partnerships, that not only are we excited about the technology coming out of GCI, but we're excited about the learnings and structure that we've experienced through GCI that can possibly be applied to other groups as well, or expansions of groups to continue to solve issues in this space or solve for opportunities. So Dr. Chapotin, I'll hand it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jessica. Lucas, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for the kind introduction, Dr. Chapotin. And thank you to FAR and the Greener Cattle Initiative fellow steering committee. So hello, everyone. I'm Lucas Huntermer. I'm a senior advisor on the external innovation team within Elanco Animal Health. What we are is a team of scientists and veterinarians that are looking for new innovative technologies and solutions that we can bring to the R&D pipeline and eventually the product portfolio for Elanco Animal Health. Elanco is a animal health focused pharmaceutical and biotechnology company. Our aim is to provide innovative animal health solutions to producers, farmers, and veterinarians. So this is a particular passion area of mine. I grew up in a very small rural agricultural community in eastern South Dakota where there are more cattle than people. I have a PhD in immunobiology, spent most of my career in research and development in bringing different vaccines, pharmaceuticals, nutritional health solutions through various stages of pipeline development. And my wife is a practicing clinical veterinarian, so we live it and breathe it in our household. So the purpose behind Elanco joining GCI really was driven by the backdrop of the COP26 commitments to lower methane emissions by 30% by 2030. Why methane? You know, we've spoke a bit about this, but it's really about the increased potency of methane and its ability to trap temperature. So small reductions in methane can make big reductions in impact on the temperature. And as was stated before, you know, methane makes up about 18% of total greenhouse gas emissions globally. About 1/3 of that methane is linked to animals. So methane is an opportunity area. We look to focus and reduce methane, but at the same time, we also need to produce more protein to feed a growing and hungry population. Globally, food is becoming more expensive. The US Bureau of Labor Statistics and Consumer Price Index in September showed that grocery prices have increased 13% over the past year. So we must simultaneously nourish the world, promote health, and reduce climate warming. We must find a way to achieve all these goals simultaneously, and it's a pivotal time for our planet when we all need to come together and take action. So some of the impetus of us joining Greener Cattle Initiative was we really viewed this as a key stakeholder event to bring all the different parts of cattle production together and be able to learn and invest into new technologies and solutions throughout that entire chain. So our vision and our kind of focus as an animal health company is really around keeping animals healthier, right? More sustainable solutions by keeping animals healthy. But the animal protein industry supports through, you know, innovations all throughout the chain, and genetics, nutrition and diet management, digestion optimization, and measurement and analytics. There's also opportunities in capturing conversion of methane into renewable natural gas. So all of these technologies and areas are potential investment opportunities, and we really viewed the Greener Cattle Initiative as a force multiplier for innovation into these different mechanisms, research and discovery into these different fields of methane reduction in cattle. I'll hand it back to you, Dr. Chapotin. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. Thank you to all our panelists for your great insights. At this point, I would invite our participants to ask questions. You can use the Q&A chat box function on Zoom to enter your question, and I will be reading questions to our panelists. Please also, as you type in your question, indicate what organization you are affiliated with and where you are joining from. I'd like to kick us off with a question before we go to participant questions, however, and I'd like to ask the panelists, how do you see the Greener Cattle Initiative's research change the sector's outlook over the next 10 to 20 years? Juan, we'll start with you.
Great, thank you. That's a great question. I think, you know, I said some of these elements earlier in my presentation, but it's a great opportunity to reemphasize this. The biggest challenge here is that enteric methane is not mitigation is not a new area of research, but yet there are still plenty of challenges in order to not only uncover additional options, but even take some of the options that already exist and use them at scale, right? To make the impact that we all want to do. I mean, the Innovation Center for US Dairy had been looking at methane and working in methane 10 years before the Greener Cattle Initiative. So that's, you know, an example. So as we project into the future, it's all about answering those pre-competitive questions that allow for options that we cannot even think of be developed, right? Also, it gives us an opportunity to collaboratively work on areas that have direct implication to what is required for that adoption at scale to also be developed. That's why in the request for applications, we even had some interesting elements, you know, that are not typically what you would see, things such as ways to measure methane emissions in a more affordable manner at scale. Understanding the difference that measuring emissions and measuring mitigation of an option, of an intervention, are not necessarily the exact same thing, right? And so techniques that allow you to also detect differences are also very important. Things, for example, such as socioeconomic analysis. What kind of socioeconomic innovation will need to accompany some of the work on the biophysical aspects of reducing methane, so that that aspect of implementation at scale can also occur. So to me, I am optimistic, and I believe that in 10 or 20 years, we're going to have additional options, and farmers in both sectors will have additional options to choose from, right? And then eventually the sectors will be able to report. Many of us, just like Jessica had mentioned, for JBS in particular, the dairy sector, in our case, we also have goals that are stated in terms of greenhouse gas neutrality, right? And so in order for all of that to happen, not only do we need the options, we need to be able to understand what these options actually do, once they're adopted, and ways to not only get them adopted at scale, but then also report back, to society how those changes are actually affecting the outcomes in terms in this case, particularly of enteric methane.
Great, thank you. Jessica.
Yeah, I just love to build on that. I completely agree with everything that Juan said, and overall just really optimistic and excited about the horizon for this topic. I think also, in addition to what Juan mentioned, the kind of acceptance level or ease of acceptance of the funded technologies or projects or questions being asked that's coming out of GCI will be really helpful. And I guess I mean, again, if you look at the group that makes up GCI, and it's not because it has to be that specific group, but if you look at the balance and perspective and the credibility and the experience of the group to bring a solution or agreed upon question that's being funded through research or potential technology to market that kind of has this group mentality acceptance around it is really helpful for accelerating quicker acceptance and adoption, I think, across others, right? So if we think about it from a business perspective, and I have, just one company or one entity bringing a potential solution to me, I always have to think about, okay, well, what are their motivating factors, right? What does this technology do for that company versus what does this technology do for the producer? And I think when you can bring a technology or a solution from this kind of cross-collaborative type of group like GCI, it really de-risks next steps for the rest of the industry. Just again, in terms of how quickly we can take the next step on some of these items. Not to say we wouldn't one way or another, but it does just help with that overall adoption. And I think, Lucas mentioned it, we're amplifying kind of the investment in this space. And I think also Juan mentioned it, it's giving us the ability to ask questions we haven't really maybe asked as an industry before. So there's focus on current technologies and understandings that are being explored, but it's also opened up the opportunity to say, bring us something brand new also. We've created an environment where that can be considered, which is challenging to do otherwise for individual companies. So very excited about it.
Thank you. Lucas, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'll add to that. And Jessica made a great point at the end there of the vision and kind of what I see in the 10 to 20 year time frame is there's going to be near-term opportunities in movement of technologies that already have some proof of concept behind them now. But then there's also going to be fundamental discovery research invested in through Greener Cattle Initiative that'll elucidate, new mechanisms or new technologies or new innovation that we haven't even necessarily seen yet, or that we can build upon and provide better solutions in that kind of later stage of that 20-year time frame. So I think the goal of all of this is to essentially have a portfolio of potential mitigation options that would have low barriers of entry to the industries to be able to utilize uptake and then provide the benefits of reducing methane.
Great, thank you. I see we've got questions coming in. Just a reminder, if you'd like to ask a question, please enter it into the Q&A function on Zoom. I have a relatively straightforward question. I'll direct this one to you, Juan. A participant from the Financial Times of London, Amico Terrazono, is asking, how much does the organization have in terms of committed funds?
Great, thank you, Dr. Shapotin. So it was mentioned we have about $5 million. I am going to make the statement that we hope to be able to have more in the future. We've been in conversations with various organizations. There's interest. And so right now, we can expect to see announcements, like I mentioned during my remarks, as soon as we get contracts in place. Can make announcements before that. Like I said, at least for $5 million, which is what we started with the initiative. I truly believe we're going to be pleasantly surprised.
Great, thank you. Here's an interesting question. Nathan Merzinskis from Number 8 Bio, joining from San Francisco, is asking, when it comes to the distribution of enteric methane mitigation solutions, what segment in both the dairy and beef value chains do you think will ultimately be the purchaser of the solutions? Is it a farmer, a co-op, a processor, a retailer? Which one of you would like to take that one on?
I'm happy to start, but then we'll look forward to my other panelists' input as well. It is such a good question, and I think the answer depends on what the supply chain looks like. So I say that to say, depending on the company and the product, some of us have much more vertically integrated supply chains than others. So I think that's one piece to consider. How, just for example, how Danone approaches, these kinds of solutions in their supply chain looks very different than how JBS is considering approaching it. And again, that just comes back to that vertical integration piece and how much direct or indirect, I think, influence in the management decisions the company has on farm. It also, I think, will depend strongly on what the benefits are that are being provided by the solution. I think we had a question here also that we might be addressing, but does the solution only result in methane emission reductions, or is there also an animal productivity, health, product quality benefit as well? So we'd have to look at that. Now, at the end of the day, this burden, the emission reductions have to happen on the farm and ranch. And so we as a value chain have to solve for how we remove that burden financially from the producer. The producer can't shoulder all of it on their own. So I think we have to solve for that question. I think it will depend on various factors for the company and the supply chain. But certainly we cannot expect the producer to shoulder that burden alone.
Thank you. That's a really critical point. Lucas, Juan, did either of you want to add to that answer?
Yeah, I can add to that answer too. I think emission reduction, animal health, animal welfare will be demanded, by the entire supply chain in the world at large, right? And I think some of the answers can be put into the basics of analytics and monetization, right? So how can we analyze and provide strong operational data on, an operations carbon footprint? So it gives a value or a data on its stewardship efforts. And then how do we kind of create economic value for farmers to keep that carbon value within the food system. I think all those are going to be key to implementation.
Yeah, so I'll add a
Great.
quick comment to that. What's critical in this, I mean, first of all, like Jessica mentioned, it really depends on how the supply chain, any particular supply chain operates. This is not going to be something that there's a blanket answer for. But there's one element that I believe is important to understand, no matter how the supply chain operates, and that is that the market value and who benefits needs to be understood, right? And from the broadest sense. I mean, at the end of the day, we really do understand that these mitigation options need to be adopted at the farm level, right? Because that's where the animals live, right? That's the location where the emissions are occurring, right? But many of these options will provide benefits that we truly don't fully understand, right? And they are going to be an action that's going to happen at a farm is going to potentially provide a benefit that could be beneficial for different actors within that supply chain. So understanding the value chain, understanding what is that economic value that can be realized from the methane reduction, and who within that value chain contributes to its creation is going to be critically important to figure out, how all of that plays out. Thank
you. This question sort of follows in a similar vein to what you were just saying, Juan. Partha Ray from the Nature Conservancy is glad to hear that socioeconomic analysis has been considered as part of GCI. And the question is GCI looking for options that will provide production and health benefits in addition to enteric methane mitigation? And Partha notes that options with only a climate or environmental benefit could face some challenges in the implementation phase. Yeah, that's a great question, and Partha, I know exactly where he's coming from. We've had, conversations in the past, so I appreciate your question, Partha. This is critical. The RFA did have language there to understand that there are certain elements that are basically non-negotiable when you're talking about mitigation, and there are needs for socioeconomic, but all of these aspects about all of these aspects about productivity, all of these aspects about the quality attributes of the raw material, here being the milk that eventually is converted into dairy foods, or the actual animal that is harvested and converted into beef products. The chain has to meet the requirements of the products that the consumers demand, right? And so it's extremely important to understand that there's potentially benefits in some cases, but there are definitely no-go areas because none of that can be compromised. So that is something that we are operating with eyes wide open on. Lucas, Jessica, if you want to add to that answer? No, we've got plenty more questions here, but feel free if you want to.
I would just reiterate that, right? Some of the keys around, health and productivity and that sort of thing are paramount, right, to any of the solutions. Yeah.
And I think the only other thing I'd add is, I think with the overarching social challenges we all face regarding climate change, it's helping us all think more and more in terms of how do we as a society value environmental impact one way or another. And so it's still clear as mud from our perspective, but this carbon marketplace and environmental impact, environmental services marketplace, I think is only or largely helping support technologies that do primarily speak to environmental impact. So there's certainly momentum behind it, but a lot to understand still and a lot to be determined still on that front.
Thank you. So our next question is from Jean-Pierre Cativiela. He's noting that, as you all noted also in your remarks, that various organizations in dairy and beef have net zero goals, and clearly enteric methane has to be reduced to help meet these goals. And the question is, does it need to reach zero to meet these goals? Or are there other pathways to reach net zero without net zero enteric emissions? And he's noting that organic rules require dairy cattle to spend time on pasture. Many cattle are on rangeland. And so what are the implications for deploying these technologies in terms of where cattle are and how you meet animal welfare and other requirements?
I'm going to jump right into that one, and thank you, Jean-Pierre, for that question. As you very well know, there are different elements to understand the true effect of methane in the atmosphere, and the short lifetime and the natural decay of methane plays a part into all of that. All of these net zero goals need to be understood also in the way that IPCC is looking at neutrality and net zero, the latest report, and that is that you examine all of these greenhouse gases and you balance them out, right? You balance out emissions, or delivery into the atmosphere of greenhouse gases that increase the temperature trapping abilities of the atmosphere with removals from the atmosphere, right? In the case of methane, because of its short natural decay, there's an opportunity to reduce the impact that methane has on atmospheric ability to trap heat by simply reducing emissions, right? So it's not necessary to completely eliminate them, whereas other types of emissions like carbon dioxide and nitrous oxide remain in the atmosphere for really long time periods, and we need to equate in those cases emissions with active removals, right? I'm going to use this opportunity to put a plug in for all of you people on this call. Please go to the FAO website, look at the latest FAO report on the Technical Advisory Group on methane mitigation. This is a report on methane on all of agriculture. It's not only enteric, it also includes manure methane, also methane that is emitted from rice fields, okay? And there's chapter 6 that talks about metrics and talks about how to interpret these metrics and how to interpret these elements of what net zero really means, and how there are different pathways to actually get to net zero. And they don't all mean that you have to eliminate all emissions. It's about balancing emissions and removals. So hopefully that helps most of you out if you get an opportunity to look at that paper.
Thank you, Juan. Lucas or Jessica, do either of you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I can just add a little bit to the piece on the different segments of cattle production in having these technologies reach. So the technology focused towards dairy is going to be different from beef, and then the different aspects of cattle production throughout the globe, right? So in Latin America, in Australia, cattle are raised different than they are in the US versus Europe, and finding solutions that can be implemented to say grazing cattle versus fed cattle. All of those are things that we need to be cognizant of when we're looking at all these new innovations, and it's a real value add of this initiative is to have all of the representation around that table to speak to some of the implementation challenges and see how we can design and mitigate.
And I think just building, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, Jessica, go ahead.
Thank you. And I think just even building on Lucas's point further, and this is going to come from a very beef specific viewpoint. So I'll apologize for that ahead of time. But, you know, I think that we continue to struggle with this. I look forward to the day where we can tell this story better, but we have to look at the benefits provided also from cattle grazing on rangelands, grazing appropriately on rangelands. Cattle, beef cattle, these cow-calf operations, these animals are raised on land that really can't produce the same level of nutrition and protein that it can through beef cattle. And beef cattle and dairy are able to do that because of their digestive system, which then releases enteric methane, right? So we're looking so closely at enteric methane, but I think we always have to push ourselves to remember what that almost that circular piece of it is, right? We love to use the term circular economy and sustainability, but we have to remember what that whole picture is and what we're able to do with the land, the benefit that cattle provide the land, again, when managed correctly from a biodiversity, soil health, wildfire mitigation perspective. And then on, I think the flip side of that, you know, so that net zero comment, as the corporate entity that's committed to net zero through the Science-Based Target Initiative, we follow SBTI guidelines for net zero. We follow GHG protocol for net zero, and GHG accounting, all of which are soundly based in IPCC. But net means net. Net does not mean absolute. So as Juan said, there's absolutely multiple options, multiple pathways to take. And then even from that science and biology perspective of the animal, what could happen to them if we reduced enteric emissions to zero, right? There has to be something there with productivity and animal health, and people much smarter than I can answer that much better. But well, again, there won't be this silver bullet, I don't think. And we always have to look at the trade-offs and the whole story. So if we found a technology that could reduce enteric emissions to a certain level, at what point does it have a negative impact on the animal's productivity and health? And how do we consider that? And then it creates trade-offs if that animal is not as productive or not as healthy. So I think there's a big picture here. There's, again, it's coming back to every operation's different, every country is different, every production system's different. And so we're trying to build a portfolio of options that work across a multitude of environments.
Thank you. Another question's come in that really follows on this thread of how do we support producers, and I'll turn this one back to you, Jessica, but invite obviously Juan and Lucas to answer it again. So Savannah Massimo from NobleGen is asking, if a feed additive mitigation strategy to reduce enteric methane were to be proven effective, what would be your proposed strategy to facilitate the practical uptake by farmers themselves? And Savannah notes that profit margins for primary producers in animal agriculture can be relatively small, and so it can be difficult for farmers to make changes to their feed programs if it impacts their bottom line. So what are the incentives that you see becoming available for farmers to adopt these strategies?
Whew, good question. Big question.
You write a book on that, right?
No, I love it. I love it. Okay, so yeah, and feed additives are a critical piece of this conversation, right? So we're really excited to see how that topic develops. Would love to hear more from Lucas and Juan on this as well. But if we take that as an example, what's the practical uptake then? Well, I think a couple of things have to be in place for the producer to really feasibly and realistically consider implementing that change on their operation. One, I think as an industry, we have to be able to prove to them that with, you know, a realistic level of confidence, as nothing can be guaranteed 100%, that it works in their production system, it works with their ranch's genetics or the genetic profile of their herd. Again, that can be beef or dairy. All of these things will influence the effectiveness of technologies, and that they're going to be able to document the use of this technology and the results of this technology to where it, again, we can never say guarantee, right? But we can assure the outcome is happening. So we don't kind of bring them along on this journey and at the end of the day say, oh, we can't actually prove it, so this was all for naught maybe. So I think we have to be able to give the producer assurances in those areas before they can consider implementing this on their operation. And then that profit margin piece is critical. So again, there has to be some kind of incentive, and that incentive could look very different, or it can take a variety of shapes, but they're not. If I'm a producer and I'm sitting here and I'm looking at how do I pay my mortgage this year and how do I purchase the feed I need for this winter, and what about those 10 heifers I need to replace in my herd? How do I cover those costs? I'm going to answer those questions before I say, how do I try a new feed additive that adds to my costs on dollar per head without a somewhat guaranteed return on investment there? So I think that could take the shape of frankly premiums or discounts. I think that could take the shape of private or public funding for the feed additive to decrease the cost per head. That can take the shape of branding and programs and markets that can charge a higher dollar amount per product. Again, there's just so many different ways this can go, but that incentive I think would have to be there in some shape or form. But would love to hear what my colleagues think as well.
Yeah, thank you. And I should have given you all warning. This will be our last question. So I invite Lucas and then Juan to each make a comment on that question as well. Thank you. Sure.
Yeah. I think, like you said, I think the ability to create economic value, especially for customers, right? The emission reduction is going to continue to be demanded throughout the supply chain. We've had efforts help create a startup called Athean that's focused on creating a marketplace within the food system to inset carbon credits. And the idea is to create that economic value for farmers, as well as a repository for that reputational value for protein products, and keeping that carbon value within the food system. The focus is essentially that our customers are able to realize the value of what they're adding into that feed and what they're doing at the farm level.
Thanks. Thanks, Lucas.
Thank you. I'm going to cheat a little bit on this question because, frankly, we've been working on some guidance for feed additive evaluation that looked at this question, and a lot of what was said already is part of what I'm gonna deliver here in like 1, 2, 3. I do want to recognize that this is some information that it's not actually yet available in the public. We're going to be sharing some of this. This information later this year, the Sustainable Ag Summit and the Dairy Sustainability Alliance meeting that's coming up, actually next week. So let me go really quickly, 1, 2, 3. First of all, adoption is challenging, and adoption is challenging because the individual actors within the supply chain can differ on what they're willing to accept in terms of safety, in terms of efficacy, in terms of trade-offs. And then there's other practical barriers, to implementation and adoption, barriers such as availability, distribution, ease of use. All of these affect the process of adoption by a producer. The second one is that there are 3 key factors that we've been able to identify that seem to be the main drivers of adoption. First of all, the ability to claim enteric methane reductions with confidence. These are all things have already been said. The ability then to market those reductions through either carbon credits, through premium, through the marketplace, or obtain some kind of incentive through a cost share benefit, right? If there's value there that society sees. And all of that, do it in simple and relatable terms so that consumers can all understand. And then consumer endorsement of these mitigation option, and willingness to pay for that premium if premiums are the way to get, that return on investment back to the producer. And then finally, something that I kind of hammered on throughout the entire presentation, which is that it requires full value chain collaboration. Adoption in particular requires full value chain collaboration. We need to have alignment that the scientific consensus on the evidence for safety, efficacy, and trade-offs is there without cutting corners and without compromising research integrity. We need to understand that there's collaboration between the natural and the social sciences to address all of these factors. We need to have all of these supply chain members collaborate to co-create these different approaches that distribute that economic value creation through all of the players, all of the actors within the value chain that have a role in creating that value. And then after all of that is achieved, you actually have to educate and train, you know, the people that are going to use it, the farmers and others like the nutritionists and the veterinarians, so that they understand what those mitigations options are and how to actually use them on farm. And that in itself, it's a huge universe, you know. So
thank you.
Yeah, anyways.
Thank you. That was a wonderful way to end this excellent panel. Thank you, Juan, Jessica, and Lucas, for taking the time to join us. To our participants for your wonderful questions. I apologize we didn't get to all of them, but we have seen them and we'll consider them. And if you would like any more information about FAR, you can visit us at our website at www.foundationfar.org. Thank you for joining us today.